And then for the final one, we have Light. Used a lot of Sean, the Light Paladin. Used a lot of Jasmine. Those were the two core units that I would say were very important. I finally got my Leo May back, so I just kind of wanted to use Leo May. It was not really a necessity in this stage. I would say that in some stages, the Eridos, which is the Shimate Light, was pretty good as well, or had options to be pretty good, but I didn't build it. I had to build a lot of the units for this stage. For example, a Mihil, I had to build a... Well, you will see later. I had to build a whole bunch of those 4-stars. Did I use any of the LD5s? I only used a Chroma a few times, but every time I used a Chroma, you might as well use Shaman, which is the thing on the left. And yeah, this first stage, there's a stun chance of 25%, but it's just taking the damage from the Jasmine skill 2. The moment that you lower attack bar, it does a good amount of damage, even on bosses. It's max 10%, so therefore you can also use it when it's not full HP. But yeah, this team was just way too many pushbacks with the Leo May and the Lauren and then everything. So this team definitely did work out from there. It was relatively easy. And yeah, I think you will be using a lot of Jasmine. If you missed the Jasmine HOH, make sure you get it back later. We have stage 11, which is limits harmful effects to 1 turn. In this case, once again, using pretty much the same team. The only difference is Dover. And Dover is an incredibly good unit for this. It has the AoE stun, it has the AoE bombs. There's just a lot of stuff going on for that unit. And with that, also things like Tetras, they all become pretty easily clearable. There's just so many stuns and CC coming from this one unit. Actually, harmful effects limit to 1 turn make it that your bombs become 1 turn straight from the get-go, which is actually kind of funny in the first place. You do have a little bit more issues with provoking, but it's definitely doable. Then the stage 12, which is the Bay, and it actually had the same limitation, limits harmful effects to 1 turn. So for that reason, if it's the same limitation, most likely can use the same team. It is a little bit tricky on the Kinkies. You have to make sure that you stun the Kinkies. I think I had to redo this stage a few times just for getting a good rotation in on the Kinkies. But the moment you stun the Kinkies, you actually want to start pushing them back right away. So just focus on whatever Kinky is stunned and hit that one first. The moment you get past that idea, then it's relatively easy. So the moment anything is stunned, make sure to hit it with the Lauren. I did have this spare on the Leo May, which did help out quite some. You could even put Jasmine on this spare for this stage. It definitely does help out for the Kinkies. And then this stage itself is relatively easy. Just make sure that you CC everything, you bomb everything, and then you just go from there. Then the next stage is an Aerial with Reflect 3000. This stage actually took me a few times. I used the Valeria here for shields because you have the reflect thing going in. I also made my Dover not violent. I just made it on a broken set because it was proccing himself to death. That's the big issue about Reflect 3000. The Dover has a skill 1 that has 3 hits, so therefore does do a lot of damage to itself. I use the Acroma in here mainly to get silence on the aerials, but you could use a Shaman to kill it fast or some other unit to provide some more CC or something like that as well. But in this case, the Acroma was actually very good in slot because you're not bound to just the provokes. But I would say that if you don't have an Acroma, just go for a Shaman and try to snipe it as fast as possible. Because in the end, I didn't need any of the silences that Acroma provided, and a Shaman would have done more damage in the first place. So plus Shaman skill 1 is also a little bit of extra healing. Then floor 14, which is a Heigang with attack increasing by 15 on every hit. This is definitely a unit where you have to use Arya. Arya's insanely strong. Like, this is the first time that I actually built it. It is, funny enough, my very first LD scroll on this account about 9.5 years ago, or well, pretty much 9 years ago right now. It was my very first LD scroll, and I never actually built the unit until just now. But she's very strong. She has that skill 1 for sleeps, and then if something is sleeping already, it will make it a 2-turn sleep on that skill 3, which is definitely very strong. I had mine not fully skilled up on the skill 1 though, which gave me a little bit of trouble in some of those stages. And in this case, I also used an Asher, which you haven't seen yet, but Asher is just for getting more CC in. You just mainly want to CC all of this. Stage itself isn't too hard, but it's super hard focused on like just trying to CC as much as possible because they get attack bar every time you hit anything, which is just kind of annoying. You also have to make sure that your Jasmine moves in front of the area, because then you can go for skill 3 with the cooltime increase. and therefore you have less issues with Odin coming back later and that kind of stuff. But in this case, I think I missed it on the Odin or something like that. Was a little bit wonky, but in the end it did work out as planned. And then you get to the boss, which is just one of those fights. Make sure you see everything and then deal all of the damage on the Heigang. You want to keep hitting the Heigang because it's actually the last the least deadly unit of this whole field. And anything else would pretty much kill you. Then floor 15, which is a Deafness, and it is a Violent, so I had to rerune everything to Swift. And immune to attack by increasing and decreasing, so definitely what you want to do here is just kill it as fast as possible and try to CC it as much with Jean, Dover, and the Arya. I also used Armana here just for the sake of having some chance of reviving, plus it has a pretty good armor break, plus branding. And once again, I used a Chroma, but the Chroma can once again also just simply be replaced by a Shaman because it's similar damage and it gives a little bit more healing as well. The only good thing about a Chroma is the silence. The silence definitely did help out. But in this case, I actually did miss the silence and did miss everything and he nearly killed my unit. But a Chroma, you pretty much just do hit the Deafness. It's not that big an issue. So you could do the same thing with a Shaman. Shaman actually does do more damage. Then we have an Artemil. This one is definitely a little bit more annoying. It has 25% chance to stun, so it has a built-in Despair, and it has attack bar increase when damage is received. You definitely want to put everything to 15 crit rate for this stage. Plus another thing for this stage, you need Oblivion, because the first wave is really easy. It doesn't really do too much, not too much going on. But in the second wave, there are Junos, and Junos you definitely have to Oblivion. So in this case, the main damage comes from the Jasmine S2. You do have a lot of turns to actually clear this. Ashe does a little bit of damage, but it's mainly the Jasmine S2 that actually does the damage. So yeah, here the Juno. So you want to Oblivion a Juno, heal block that same Juno, and then start killing it. So it's definitely a little bit of a tricky thing. I use Nigong in this case. If you don't have Nigong, I would recommend to use Iona. Iona is kind of a similar thing. The only difference with Iona is that Iona's skill 2 doesn't deal any damage, whereas Nigong's skill 2 is pretty good damage. Iona is a better single target healer, whereas Nigong is a better AoE healer. So it's good and bad for both situations. Because single target healing is quite good in this game mode. Because they will always focus the unit with the lowest HP. Whereas AoE healing becomes a little bit less interesting for that reason. Because they will still tumble down the damage in that one unit that's low on HP, from what I've noticed. So I wanted to use my Nigong. But I would say that an Iona would pretty much do the same job, maybe even slightly better. It's just less damage, so you have more chance to get RNG'd by stunned in this position. So yeah, in this case, you just kill the Junos first with the Oblivion and the heal block from the Asher. And then you just move on to the other units. It's not too hard of a stage, just make sure that your, Arya doesn't go for a skill 3 as long as the Junos are not Oblivioned or heal blocked, or that you can actually deal some stuff to them. Because then you might have a little bit of an issue. And then you end up at the Achroma stage. And the Achroma stage, or not the Achroma, Artemil stage. And then the Artemil stage, it is a little bit annoying. It does have a lot of those stuns. I was checking like, okay, which one does actually have a passive? Because I barely know these units. But what you kind of want to do is just hit the Artemil or the side Skogul thingies, the water Skoguls. And you always want to make sure that the moment that a area can heal, that there is heal block on it. So just make sure that you're only hitting it when there's a heal block on it. And that way you just make it work. All of the area skills go to the side, of course. You do have a strip on skill 1 of the Ikasha, which is the unit in the middle. So definitely do use that the moment that the defense buff comes up, because that would add quite a bit more damage. Also, your Jasmine skill 1 has that buff block, which is definitely very useful. So you just want to throw all of the skills a little bit to the side, deal the damage with, if you have a Nigong on the S2, on that aerial as well. And if not, you just hit the side things as much as possible. Don't give the aerial too many turns. Or no, aerial, Artemil, whatever. Saving everything. Achroma, Artemil, aerials, everything with an A. So yeah, that's just what you want to do. Make sure about that heal block. That heal block is just very important. Okay, he had the defense buff, instantly stripped with the skill 1 of Ikasha. It's a little bit lucky that that activation rate isn't too high. But as you can see, they all didn't do all too much damage to me. It's more about the control of the attack bar of the Artemil and then going for the heal blocks. That's the main thing that you wanted to do. And then it's a clear. Then the next stage is once again a Leo, and it starts off with a silence, and then you also go for attack bar increase when damage received. This one you gotta cheese the living shit out of, and they had to rerune a lot of stuff. And this is the team, and this team takes very long. I had my whole team runed up on double will, because you start off with a silence. So all of these units would tend to do a lot of damage to you if you don't have that double will. And I had like double will, endure, double will, enhance, double will, determination, double will, shield. All of those and a double will broken. So that's kind of just what you want to do. And then the main thing what you want to do is try to get your invisibility up as much as possible. You do have your skill 1 with Mihail, which is also a dot, which helps out a little bit for that. You do need all of those units that you see here on the field. I don't really see any replacements too much, because the Ileana helps out a lot with giving extra invisibility and that kind of stuff. Because you have a bunch of Leos in, or well, Leo with pretty much just a team up. You pretty much just get full on Trikaru by this, more or less, if you don't do it. So you really want to make sure about your that if your defense break is, or if defense break is on something, you want to make sure that it's also with invis. And you have to make sure that the torrent is just hitting something that is invis at that time. Can take you maybe a few rotations. I actually cleared it in the first try. Maybe was a little bit lucky on that, but it's a little bit of a tricky stage, but it is definitely doable. Then the next stage is a Smicer with immune to continuous damage and also stunts. So once again, using a whole bunch of pushbackers. It was relatively an easy stage. You get like 3 stuns. It's so nice to see your Lauren both Vio proc and stun, and your Arya's doing the same thing. Ikasha was needed for some Oblivions, because the Oblivion is needed on Amduets later. The Amduets are pretty annoying. You don't deal all too much damage. Once again, damage comes from the Jasmine. And you just clear it from there slowly on. Ashe does a little bit of damage, and then the final stage is where it gets a little bit more tricky. Because this is where you have to Oblivion these Amduets. And you actually have to push back the Smicer as much as possible. But I was getting resisted a lot on this stage. There were a lot of resistance all the time. I did have one very lucky moment where the Smicer just completely missed the stun, missed the bomb. So that definitely did help out quite a bunch. But I was missing a lot of skills over here, and I really had struggles pushing back the Smicer. So every Lorne skill that you have should actually be targeted towards the Smicer to keep the Smicer attack bar down. You can't really have the luxury of placing that anywhere else. In the end, it did work out, but it definitely felt like a pretty bad fight. Then this stage is probably the hardest on light. It is 22% of extra turn. It is attack bar increase on hit. And we're fighting a light Ivor. But not just a light Ivor, you also have Magnums in the first stage. So you definitely do need your buff block. This stage took me a few times, mainly because, well, if you get armor broken, mainly on your Jean, then everything just starts dealing a shit ton of damage. And I would say making everything on like 60 resistance and taking the resistance lead from Jean is probably the right play. I was planning to do that if I was going to fill one more time after that I actually succeeded, but I didn't, the one time I did succeed, I didn't need it. But the next thing that I was planning to do was actually make everything 60 resistance, put the lead of the Jean, and then also go for an Iona instead. Mainly because Iona is such a mainly because Iona is just a way better single target healer than Nigong is, because Nigong is AoE healing, but then all of the units still hit the exact same target, which isn't that chill. For the stage itself, you have the Magnum, so make sure you're not doing any skills. You definitely do need a Linda to aid there. My Linda was not max skilled, but it's definitely very useful. Just always use your Linda skills. It is the attack break, it is the glancing, it does a lot of stuff towards the enemy that they don't deal too much damage on you. As you can see, they take a whole bunch of turns, but they never really doing too much damage. With the Maladin on the right, I think she's called Maladin, the hammer girl. Never use your skill 2, because anytime you give buffs, the Magnums will actually gain attack bar and get attack buff. So you definitely don't want to do that at this moment. But you will use that for later stage in this one. In this one, make sure every time that you're glanced by the Varisas, you only hit the Varisas, you never actually hit the Carbines. Because Carbines do get attack buff instant turn, or 100% attack bar, not an instant turn. But attack buff, and yeah, that is pretty deadly if you do that. So make sure that you don't glance those units. And from there, it's relatively easy. They don't do all too much damage. Getting to the boss stage in this one wasn't that hard at all. Just have to be careful. So now at the boss stage, what you want to do is you want to try to get your invis on. You don't want to give as many debuffs as possible to the enemy. And then just try to hit everything a little bit try to get them that they don't get immunity up. If they get immunity up, it's a little bit annoying. But I did notice in this fight already where I was also saying like, okay, I definitely have to check for getting the resistance in. Because if you resist those stuns, if you resist those strips, it definitely helps out a little bit. The fight was looking pretty bad. I already thought I kind of lost. But the sleep of Nigong was actually kind of clutch in this case, I would say. That's definitely can't lie about that part. But also my Linda was on Despair. I think Despair would help out the most for Linda over here. But the fight is not really over the moment that they start switching targets a lot with trying to hit everything a little bit. I also did get a very good revive into proc over there, which actually did give me quite some chance to come back. And as you can see, the moment that they don't land the armor break or the Ivor doesn't land the armor break, they're not doing as much damage. So that's definitely why I was saying like, okay, probably resistance is the way to go. Especially if you have that many buffs going on. They are not doing all too much, and this is suddenly looking pretty nice, so that's definitely where you would need that reviver. I don't really think you can do this without the reviver. Would get a little bit, or quite a bit more difficult without. And yeah, at some point you just deal enough damage to the mid-boss by it just taking too many turns, and then your String Master just does a lot of damage. That's where the main damage comes from, it's not really the Nigong or anything. And then the final boss, using all kinds of units that I've already shown. Nigong, once again, good replaced by simply a Iona. Elsharian, everyone should have, not that much of an interesting unit. In this case, you don't have that much healing going on, because the Nigong solo healer is just like an 11k heal per skill 2. So you definitely have to be checking that you steal as much of the buffs. They do a good amount of damage on you. Actually, I noticed later that the Ursas were just doing good damage from dots, whereas the Hubesenovs actually did pretty good damage from just the skill 1 already, so that was kind of dangerous. But you kind of have to toy around, play around with the invisibility on the lowest unit every time. Mainly boost Ileana to self and then get the invis up faster. And that was kind of my way to play, so... yeah, it definitely did look out like a pretty tricky fight. My units are near to that. I would say that once again, Iona is probably a better healer over here. It's just that the Nigong skill 2 does pretty good chip damage as well with every time an 11k on the enemy. It definitely does help out. This stage was pretty funny because this is actually... they kill themselves and then they can go for the trade. But you actually have to steal one of those, or that's invis the moment it's an invis. And then you can just simply clear it. So it didn't do too much in the end, but it was definitely an interesting fight in the first place. So yeah, just kind of try to survive. Actually, that's the whole name of this stage, just try to survive. Then on the final boss, this one is a little bit different. The right crystal every time gives invis to the boss. If the boss didn't get hit during the whole fight, or like during not taking a turn, or during taking a turn, he wasn't hit before that, then he does like an insane more damage. So in this case, every time that you can, you actually have to steal the invis. At some point, I went for killing the right crystal, whereas like this boss just kind of kills itself by taking turns for the String Master, but also your Jasmine skill too. But at some point, I was like, maybe I should just kill the right crystal because it's looking kind of bad on the healing part that I'm doing. So that's at some point what I did later. I'm not sure if that's really the right play. Every time that it gets invis, you're like, oh, I better land it right now. Because if you don't land it, you're immediately dead. Like, super freaking dead. So, but the moment that you kill the right crystal, invis thing is gone. So, it was a little bit tricky at first. I did get it on the first try, but it definitely looks like a super tricky fight. But you just have to make sure that you try to get your rotations in. You try to strip that invis all the time. I went for killing the right crystal, but I was really doubting it right here if that was the right choice. In the end, I did go for it. And I did manage to clear the boss just at the time where I would have started hitting it. Because the moment that you hit the boss, you still get the reflects. And that is quite a bit less good in general. So every time I was kind of trying to divert the amount of hits that I could do. And this is also an attack bar on hit, but it was pretty close in the end, but definitely did clear it out at the end. So that was the whole light tower. I would say also not that difficult of a tower. I think the 19 was a little bit more annoying. And I had to like full rerune for some of those stages where I had to get double will on the whole team. So there was definitely a little bit more reruning involved. That definitely made this tower take a little bit longer time. But was it super difficult? No, I think this tower was pretty doable as well. So guys, thanks a lot for watching. That was the last of the towers. I will also do spires probably upwards of 54 because that's the current stage that I'm at. Maybe for that one, I will just highlight the stages that are actually more difficult, because I think a lot of the stages are not that difficult in those. And yeah, see you in the next video, guys. Thanks a lot for watching. See you later. Thanks for watching. If you would like to see more guides, join the Discord and check out the content tab, which has the dungeon guide archive and the video guide archive, which contains all of the guides that you need. Hope to see you there.